Okay, it's 30 It's 6:30 on a Monday. So this is the time that every week I will be doing my Mastering Life Shorts, and this is webinar number 2. Today we're going to be talking about metaphors and how metaphors can help you show up in life in different ways to really enhance the way that you behave in a really intentional manner. So, first of all, why would we use metaphors? So, if you remember back to your English grammar teaching days or as a student, then a metaphor would be something like, my boss is Wonder Woman. And in this case, we're not actually saying that your boss is Wonder Woman. You're saying that your boss is like Wonder Woman, but using the word like or as would be a simile. Um, and you're saying that your boss, maybe in this case, it might be that your boss is really focused and she's really, uh, powerful. But at the same time, we're ignoring the fact that your boss doesn't wander around in skimpy lycra clothing and she doesn't fly. So metaphors really bring out the thing that we want them to bring out. They're not seen as anything bigger than that. Now, in BDSM, we use metaphors all the time, almost like they're actual nouns. So that's a picture of me with my slave. I'm his master. Now, I clearly, in this day and age, we're not allowed to own other human beings. However, there's an understanding of the relationship that we have between each other in that master-slave. I've also had puppies in the past. Now, puppies are different from slaves. Puppies, for example, don't tend to like humiliation play. They tend to be a bit more fun. They like games, and they're less likely to be into pain, for example. So we use these metaphors as ways of, shortcutting a whole explanation of what we're looking for. So to say I'm a brat would, if someone said that they were a brat to me, then I would know immediately what that meant, and I would decide whether or not that was something I was interested in playing. Other people will go out and say, tonight I'm going to be a real pig in the sex club. And that is a thing that they then inhabit, and then the next day they'll be in their suit and tie back in the office, acting like your average worker. So you put on these different metaphors as a way of showing up differently in life. Now, we can also use metaphors in emotions. And I had a client who used to say when his work was going really well, he would act like Formula One. And to show you what I mean by this, this is a very brief clip from a pit stop in an F1 um, competition. And as you see, when the team are preparing, everyone has got their place, everyone knows what they're about to do. They're still aware of what's going on around them. That one in the top left who is grabbing something now, he's clearly capable of doing more than just his job. And the amazing thing is, I've seen this 4 or 5 times, and every time I watch that clip, there's another thing I see because there's so much going on. Now, clearly, for my client that I was talking to, wasn't talking about Formula One in terms of a team. He was talking about his head, in that he had several things he had to do, and when he was acting in a Formula One way, then he was able to really put everything in place, be really efficient. When it went too much, it turned into anarchy. There was just too much going on. He would try to do something when something else was coming in, and that felt like Mad Max to him, like one of the Mad Max races. So by developing these metaphors, he was then able to really focus on what he was feeling at a particular time. And he was able to notice when he was going into Mad Max mode and pull it back. So when he went into Mad Max, then maybe that's the moment to turn off the emails, or not answer that next phone call, or maybe just step away from the computer, have a cup of coffee, calm down a bit, go back, and then you can refocus. Now, in your everyday life, maybe you're really hot-headed, and maybe with your partner, you find yourself arguing. And that's really destructive behavior. So maybe you'll notice that you have, I don't know, the Incredible Hulk coming out of you. And when you feel that Hulk starting to build, you know you need to rein it back a bit, go for a walk, come out of that situation. And then when you go back to have those conversations, you can be much more in control of yourself. So developing metaphors that match your emotions can be really positive. There are also loads and loads of metaphors used in leadership development. So this, for example, is one model of leadership, which gives different ways of thinking about leaderships. Now, you might use this if you're a leader in an organization to consider the type of leader you would like to be and whether you're actually there. You might also look at you might ask your subordinates where you are, or the senior managers in a organization might look down at their middle leaders and say, where are they, who's doing what? So if we just very quickly go through this grid, then, for example, if you've got low concern for staff, low concern for getting the job done, so you're really not interested, this is impoverished management. I've seen this when people are about to retire, for example. I've also been into organizations and I've thought, what, did they just get some stone off the street? What on earth are you doing in that position? Really bad management. I've worked with a country club manager. So she was actually my equal in an organization, and she was so concerned for the staff that nothing ever got done. So when we had this massive project going on with huge amounts of pressure, huge amounts of money being pushed into it, massive regulation, she was so busy going, oh, the poor staff, they're working long hours and they don't know how to do. All the staff listened to her, and it really, really dragged out the whole process. It was really problematic, really unhelpful. On the other hand, I've also worked when I was a student. I worked in restaurants, as almost every student does, and we had task compliance managers. They know that they don't care about the staff because they'll get millions of staff. The students and low paid foreign workers and agency workers that will do these waiting jobs that anyone could do, at least in Britain. So they have no concern for the staff. They're really concerned about the job, and they'll happily shout at people. And if they never come back, they don't care. Really unhelpful, really toxic environments to work in. I've also worked with a middle of the road manager. This manager was problematic in that you never knew where you stood. On one day, she was saying, that it was all about the team, and she would put in place things to make the work environment better. On the next day, she'd be so focused on the next thing that she wanted to push through in the organization that the team be damned, and you didn't know where you were. It also led to a really strange situation where you would have some groups of people who just happened to be ticking her boxes at the time being pushed forwards, and other people were left behind, and it was nasty from that point of view. Ironically, she thought she was very values driven, and she probably would have said that she had high concern for staff, but it didn't show up all the time. Team management is very much when you are really showing both equal concern for the staff and for the job. And I have worked with one of those. And that particular manager, in fact, in the same company as the country club manager, this manager was really aware that there are certain things that just needed to be pushed through. And when these were being pushed through, then she put the pressure on. However, she would also make sure she rang up those team members who were putting extra effort in and say, I know you're doing this. Thank you very much. Can you find some time next week to take some extra time off? Or just saying thank you was enough sometimes to acknowledge that people were doing that and really caring for her staff. Now, how would you use this again? As I said, it would be very much about how you want to show up to work, and at different times, maybe you need different things. There are times in crisis that really it's about getting the job done and nothing else. There are times that really you need to work on your staff. So being a bit more mindful by using these metaphors, that would help. Now, not everyone is a CEO or a boss of an organization. However, you can even take metaphors up to the organizational level. So something like McDonald's, for example, would be like a machine, in that everything is in place across the whole world, that everything is consistent, everything is delivered on time, the staff greet people in the same way, down to the amount of salt on all of the fries. Really finely developed team throughout the whole thing. These metaphors can be both uh, internal, to do with the way the organization works, and external, and there's a crossover with culture here. So something like Google is seen as often seen as brains, in that they are really, that they tend to develop their staff, and they want to give their staff the ability to think. um, Political parties would be classic instruments of domination, where you're never really sure what's going on, who's actually talking to who in the corridors of power. I've worked in the psychic prison, and that's actually when I was a school teacher. Um, in that, what happens in psychic prisons is you have this competition built up between different areas, and it can be really healthy. So for example, I was the head of science, and I was always pushed against the drama department, who had really good results, and that was seen as a healthy competition. But it did develop some strange counterproductive behaviors, in that, for example, the drama department would take kids out of my science lessons in order to improve their results. So again, if you've got an organization, you can use metaphors to really push the whole the culture and the way that organization is perceived, both by the employees and by other stakeholders, by the owners, the people outside, the customers, and you can use metaphors in those sorts of ways. Now, how would most people use metaphors if you don't own an organization? Well, a classic case would be if you were giving a presentation. So you could think to yourself, how do I want to show up to this meeting, in this presentation? Do I want to show up as a TED talker, that sparky, interesting person that everyone listens to and goes, wow, brilliant ideas? Or do you want to be the wise owl, who's quiet and just imparts wisdom when people are ready? Do you want to be the challenger that comes in and sort of breaks down barriers? So what you do is you think about this metaphor that you want to use. You would then go think through how that person would act, behave, even down to what they would wear, how they would stand, what presentation they would have, and you give that presentation. I used to do this when I was a teacher. I was Mr. Bennett when I wore a suit, and I was Matthew when I was in my t-shirt and jeans. And Mr. Bennett had a very different personality from Matthew. Um, if you're going to a bar and you're one of these people who hates going to bars on your own, because you sit in the bar, in the corner, having a couple of drinks, feeling a bit lonely, feeling a bit lost, and wondering how other people are getting on with it, half the time they're blagging it. So you can walk into a bar and inhabit a persona. I do this myself. I go into a bar that I've never been to before on my own, or if I'm waiting for friends or something, and instead of being the wallflower, I'll think, how would I want to be seen by other people? And maybe I'll use a metaphor for that. Maybe I'll be like, I'm going to be the Jack the Lad, or I'm going to be the hustler, or you could be the cougar, or whatever. Or you could have a name, Matthew 2.0. And you can even think about how you're going to stand, where you're going to stand, how you're going to drink your drink, how fast you drink your drink. All of these things, if you think forwards and then you inhabit that person, I'm going to be Matthew, the best person in the bar. That's who I will come across as. And you're not being inauthentic. You're just really bringing forwards those parts of your personality that you want to show up with. Now, as always, I've got a worksheet that you can work through with some exercises for taking this forward. It's on my website, englishleathermaster.com/mastering-life-shorts. You go and download it. There's a password to the website, to the worksheet, and it's transform with a capital T. And in that worksheet, what you'll do is you'll first of all think about the metaphors that you do use in everyday life, both at work and in your personal life. And then you'll start to think about how you would like to show up differently in different ways, and develop metaphors for that. Now, obviously, it's quite easy to do this on your own, but if you want some help, then by all means get in contact with me, and we'll talk about maybe working as a coaching conversation on developing some metaphors for how you want to be. Next week, I'm going to be introducing you to the first 3 of 10 ideas for wholehearted living that come from one of my favorite TED talkers, Brené Brown. And they're ways that you can really live your life to become more wholehearted, more satisfied, more authentic, and really push forward your life. So I'm really looking forward to that. If anyone's got any questions at this point, feel free to put them in the chat box if you're watching this live. I'm going to be putting this up on YouTube. And if you are watching this on YouTube and you've got any questions, then go to my website, englishleathermaster.com, and send me a message. And I'd love to hear any feedback you have as well. So thank you very much. And if there's no questions today, then I will see you next week.